This peculiar species of crocodilian was once abundant in the great rivers of India. Today, less than 300 adults are left in the wild, struggling to prevent the extinction of the species. They are called gharials, and until the turn of the century, they were plentiful in the sacred river Ganges. They take their Latin name from that river, Gharial Gangeticus, the Ganges Gharial. As a result of hunting by man, the gharial has now disappeared from the river Ganges, and this story is set in 3 other rivers in India. The long-snouted gharial has lived in the deeper pools of these fertile rivers for many millions of years. The gharial is the only living member of the family Gavialdi. The other members of the family are now extinct. They grow to massive proportions and reach a length of 7 to 8 meters, nearly 23 feet or more. In contrast to many other crocodilians, gharials are very shy, and in spite of their massive body size and ferocious appearance, they are harmless to man. The male gharial grows a strange hump at the tip of its snout at maturity, and it is from this that the animal takes its name. The hump is thought to resemble a pitcher, which is called gara in Hindi. The male gharial is the only crocodilian to have this hump. The female does not have it. Its exact function has puzzled the scientific world until recently, and indeed many parts of the gharial's natural history were unknown until this film was made. Unlike other crocodilians, which feed on a great range of prey, including mammals, the gharial feeds exclusively on fish. Its body is streamlined and provides the propulsion. The legs are relatively small and used for stabilization. The peculiar jaws look strangely thin when compared with the solid muscular body, but a thin snout moves through the water with less resistance, so that the gharial can catch even the fastest moving fish. To swallow their catch, they always return to the surface. The jaws of the gharial have 108 sharp teeth, which are perfectly adapted for catching and manipulating fish. The catch is tossed into position before it's swallowed. This sometimes takes several minutes. If gharials catch fish larger than they can swallow, they break them into smaller pieces, thrashing their heads from side to side above the water. Smaller fish go down in one, head first. That way the fins and scales don't snag the gullet. Ever since the fish-eating gharials evolved about 100 million years ago, They have lived in the rivers of the Indian subcontinent. At the turn of the century, they were numerous in the Ganges and the Brahmaputra river systems in India and Nepal, the Mahanadi of central India, the Indus of Pakistan, the Padma of Bangladesh, and perhaps the Irrawaddy of Burma. The last few gharials alive today are found in several protected sanctuaries like Corvette National Park. It is India's oldest nature reserve and lies in the foothills of the Himalayas. The Ramganga River runs gurgling through the park, its snow-fed waters chillingly cold throughout the year. Like all reptiles, gharials depend on external heat to raise their body temperatures, and basking in the sun is an important activity. They spend a long time checking to see that it is safe before leaving the water. Taking their cue from the first gharial to emerge, the others head for their favorite basking sites. In winter, they may spend the whole day basking if left undisturbed. In summer, just a few hours is enough for them to warm up. Gharials are the most aquatic of the crocodilians. Because their front legs are poorly developed, this puts them at a great disadvantage on land, and they never venture far from the water's edge so that they can return quickly to safety if necessary. The old males are the last to come out of the water. They're extremely wary and are very seldom seen basking. It is not known how long gharials live, but this one is at least 25 and might live as long as 100. As the day warms up, turtles bask on the riverbank too. The gharials sleep for short periods, but they are constantly listening for danger. River otters share the home of the gharial on the Ramganga River, and they eat the same fish. After feeding, this group of otters takes a break out on the sandbank. Otters are playful, apparently unafraid of gharials, and sometimes entertain themselves at the gharial's expense. The otters are more agile than the gharials and tease them by swimming round them just out of range. They even dare to bite the massive gharial's tail. The gharial moves off to find another, more peaceful basking spot, and the otter rejoins its companions. While basking, the gharial often gapes its jaws, and scientists offer different explanations for this. Some say it is a form of communication, others that it may help the animal cool down. A more simple explanation is that gaping is just a change from keeping their mouths shut. Whatever the reason, both gaping and yawning are very infectious. If one does it, the rest often do it too. At the end of the day, the gharials re-enter the water. Perhaps many more gharials would have been alive today if they had spent less time basking, for it is while out of the water that they are most vulnerable to man. The gharial has been hunted for centuries. Here we see a page from Baba's memoirs depicting a gharial hunt of the first Mughal emperor of India, Akbar, 400 years ago. In most recent times, large male gharials were the target of big game and trophy hunters. A prince of the state of Orissa is said to have shot 100 gharials in a single day just for target practice. But it was the increasing demand later on for its skin for leather goods, handbags and shoes in the West that nearly finished the gharial. By 1972, the population in the wild was less than 100. The gharial was on the brink of extinction. It was only then that the government of India stepped in and banned all gharial hunting and all trade in its skin. Recently, 6 more sanctuaries were created for the last few animals, but they are not always as safe as they might be. Satkoshia Gorge Sanctuary on the Mahanadi River in the state of Orissa. The Mahanadi is full of fish and an ideal habitat for the gharials. It's good fishing for the local people too. To protect the gharials, the use of these large nets has been banned in the sanctuary. In the past, many gharials have become entangled and died in them. But the fishermen still use the nets illegally, and the wildlife protection guards wage an unceasing battle against these men. They confiscate the nets and fine the offenders, but the whole thing is very difficult to police. In addition to the problems with fishermen, transportation of bamboo down the Satkoshia Gorge also threatens the gharial. The cheapest method for getting the bamboo to the paper mills is to raft it downstream, but this disturbs the shy gharials. Bamboo rafting may prevent them from basking, for example. The struggle of man versus gharial goes on even in the protected regions. To the northwest of Satkoshia Gorge in central India is the most important gharial refuge of all, the National Chambal River Sanctuary. There are 530 kilometers of river with a breeding population of about 60 gharials. Not very large by any standards, but it's the largest in India and indeed in the world. Breeding begins at the end of winter. The dominant males form harems of 3 or 4 females. There are so few gharials that in their eagerness to mate, the females may sometimes approach other females by mistake. The male advertises its presence loudly. The male emits a combination of whistles and hisses that are amplified by its nasal hump. It's a noise that can be compared only with the sound produced by a steam locomotive. A responsive female approaches the male, raises her snout beside him, and replies with softer calls. Bubbling of air by both further confirms their acceptance of each other. Alternately surfacing and submerging, the partners now swim side by side towards shallow water. When the female is touching the river bed, the male can mount her. He must be very careful to make the right moves now, for if he makes a mistake in courtship or mounting, then the female will desert him immediately, even right at the last moment. The male is unsuccessful, and seeing another female approaching, he decides to court her instead. To encourage her, he claps his jaws. These jaw claps are clearly audible above the surface, even though they're made underwater. After several attempts, the male gets a secure hold on the female. The love-locked pair will then go down into deep water to mate. When mating is over, the female moves away, and the male may well try the next member of the harem. A month after mating, the females increasingly climb out onto the riverbanks to find a suitable nesting site. This is when they make their longest journeys on land, wandering as far as 10 meters from the water. No one has ever filmed a female gharial prospecting for a nest site before, let alone laying her eggs. It took filmmaker Naresh Bedi and his team 3 years to film this event. The first 2 years they missed it altogether, and the third year there were days of endless waiting for the full nesting story. One day at dusk, a female crawled up the bank towards them. It seemed that she was ready to lay her eggs. But suddenly, a storm began to blow up. The female started digging her nest with her hind legs in the torrential rain. But filming came to an abrupt halt. The camera lights out on the riverbank had temporarily failed to dance. A scorpion crawled into the hide to shelter from the storm, but nothing would deter the camera team now. A tape recording of croaking frogs was switched on to cover any accidental sound that might scare the nesting female back to water. The camera lights were restored, and then out in the darkness the female was finishing her digging. A gharial looks at its most prehistoric out of the water. It has taken her 3 hours to excavate her nest. Then she begins to lay her eggs, each at intervals of 1.5 minutes. She keeps her legs inside the nest to prevent the eggs falling too heavily on the ones already laid. Egg laying is a tiring process. After 45 minutes, she's exhausted and almost unable to force her 23rd and last egg out. But she soon begins the laborious process of filling the nest in again to cover the eggs. It was almost 300 million years ago that the reptiles developed an egg with a shell that could incubate out of water. This enabled them to conquer the land, and they then dominated it for 200 million years. The crocodilians are an aquatic leftover from the time when reptiles ruled the world, the age of the dinosaurs. In fact, the gharial's whole nesting process is somehow highly reminiscent of that ancient era. The female gharial uses the weight of her body to compact the sand covering the eggs. This trampling motion is perhaps the same instinctive movement that the dinosaurs used to bury their eggs. To conceal all traces of the nest, she moves to several positions and throws on more sand. It has taken her a full 10 hours to complete nesting, and the female's task is by no means over. During the next few weeks, she will keep an increasingly anxious watch on her eggs to protect them from the danger of predation. The next morning, she's still by her nest. At this stage, the scent of the mucus made while she was laying the eggs is strong and is easily detected by animals like jackals and monitor lizards. Gharials have to be highly vigilant. Further up the Chambal River, in a very remote area, a team of Forest Department rangers are looking for more gharials nesting sites. In this wild region, the camera team had to be protected by armed guards. The ravines which border this river are terrorized by bandits notorious for kidnapping and murdering people. Fortunately, there were no serious encounters on this trip. Since 1974, the government of India has joined forces with international organizations to conserve the nearly extinct gharial. In a joint project, gharial eggs are collected for hatching in captivity. Many of these employed for the project are local boatmen, people who in the past have probably killed hundreds of gharials and eaten many of their eggs. But today they've changed sides and are helping the conservationists.
नीचे तो बहुत मोटा रेत है। नीचे तो मोटा है। रेत बहुत गर्म हो गया है। ये गड्ढा खोदा है। ये वाला है।
The nest cavity can be located by probing into the sand with a blunt steel rod.
ज़्यादा तार मत डालो। और इधर यार मालूम तो देता।
The team were fortunate this year and found 3 nests at this site. Many facts are still being uncovered about gharial breeding habits. For example, a female gharial buries her eggs a foot below the surface. This is for a very good reason. Even when the surface of the sand becomes scorchingly hot, the eggs buried below remain at a uniform temperature of 30 to 35 degrees centigrade. The eggs are carefully marked. It's vital that the red spot is uppermost during transportation. If reptile eggs are rolled during incubation, the membranes inside are damaged and the embryos become deformed. There can be up to 100 eggs in each nest, depending on the age and size of the female. The eggs weigh about 180 grams and are 3 times the size of a hen's egg. Nesting sites are normally on high sandbanks like this one. They are traditional and probably used by many generations of gharial. High up, the nests are protected from being washed away by floods. The eggs are carefully transferred into the boxes and kept in the same orientation as they were laid in the nests. A covering of moist sand is added, and then they're loaded into the boat. River transport is the only way to get the eggs to the hatchery. There are no roads here. When a favorable wind blows, the boats make good headway against the stream. But when the wind dies, the boats have to be pulled along laboriously by hand. It may take 24 hours to get the gharial eggs out of this area. It's important to be as far away as possible, for the monsoons are on the way. The monsoon season is imminent in central India. Anticipating the arrival of the rains, the male weaver birds begin making their nests up in the trees. The nests are compactly woven out of grass and strips of leaves taken from the rice paddies. They are very elaborate structures. Down below, in the river, the male gharial keeps a close watch on the spot where his female laid the eggs a month ago. While the eggs are incubating, the female seems totally preoccupied with their safety, and she neither feeds nor sleeps for long at this stage. After sunset, she comes ashore and lies just a few meters from the nest, apparently waiting for the eggs to hatch. After roughly 70 days of incubation, the baby gharials under the sand break their eggshells and begin to call. Responding to the calls, the female begins to dig her babies out. The male, meanwhile, has come out of the water and has moved up beside her. This is much too close for her comfort, and she tries to head him off. Digging out the young is her job. It would seem that he wants to catch a glimpse of the newborn young and pushes closer, but they are still buried under the sand. With the male in the way, she will never complete the job of digging her young out before daybreak, so she prods him away. Eventually, he'll move back and wait behind her. Responding to the vibrations produced by their mother's digging, the clutch begins croaking in chorus. It's high time to get the young out of the nest. An hour later, a third gharial has appeared on the scene. It's another female, a younger individual. The young female is very curious and moves hesitantly towards the older, perhaps trying to learn something about the hatching process, though one can't be absolutely sure of her motives. The mother has partially excavated the nest and is trying to judge how close she has dug to her young. The junior female is rebuked for venturing too close. The mother digs and rests alternately. It's a tiring process. The male's desire to be with the young is so strong that despite the difficulty of moving his massive 600 kilos bulk across the ground, he approaches the nest again. It was not known before that the male and other gharials were present at this time, or even that the mother came to dig out her young. The mother is irritable and makes it quite clear that no one is welcome near her right now. The mother turns sideways to see the progress of her work. Because a gharial's eyes are on top of its head, it cannot see what's going on directly underneath. Despite the loud croaking, the second female keeps her distance. Now the sand has been cleared away from above the eggs, hatching starts. The baby gharials break the shell with an egg tooth on their snout. Only when their protruding nostrils get the first breath of air have they the energy to break out completely. The weaker hatchlings are exhausted by the effort and rest to regain their strength. To emerge from the egg, they pull with their front feet and then straighten their curled bodies out of the shell. The mother simply watches them hatching and then gently scrapes both hatchlings and the empty shells out of the nest. The hatchlings are 30 to 40 centimeters long, and their average weight is about 100 grams. Many crocodile species carry their young to the water in their mouths, but gharials cannot do this because their teeth are too sharp. Also, the position of their eyes makes it difficult for them to see the young in the nest below. At one time, people thought that gharials carried their young on their backs to the water, but this was not true in this case. The female excavated the nest in such a way that the hatchlings could climb out of it and walk down to the water by themselves. The mother waits until she cannot hear any more hatchlings croaking in the nest. If one is trapped beneath the sand, she'll go and dig it up. The release of the hatchlings from the nest has taken over 10 hours altogether. By the time it's all over, it's daybreak. The young are in the water. For a fortnight, the hatchlings are sustained by the yolk in their stomachs, which gives them a somewhat distended look at first. They cannot swim for long and like to climb out of the water every so often. There is no resting platform which is safer or more willing than the floating bodies of their parents. A little later, the mother returns to the nest site. One of her babies has not made it to the water. It was crushed by mistake while she was opening the nest. The male takes care of the youngsters while the female is out on the bank. When it comes to parental care, the gharial is an amazingly gentle animal. But no amount of coaxing from its mother will bring this hatchling back to life. The female soon returns to the water. Assisted by the male, she does her best to keep predators away from her hatchlings. No bird of prey, fish, jackal or turtle will dare approach with the parents around. They are suspicious even of their own kind. The young gharials are only a few weeks old when the Indian monsoon season reaches its height. The water comes pouring down the hills. The river swells into rushing, muddy torrents, sweeping baby gharials away from their parents. For many, life lasts less than a month. It is estimated that only 1% of the hatchlings born survive the initial struggle for existence. Many Indian rivers flood disastrously during the monsoon. The reason for this is that so many of the forests have been cut down that the hillsides have no ability to hold the water, and it just floods down in one giant rush. This ecological imbalance brings destruction not only to the gharials, but to the people too. With helicopters, the army can bring relief to the people. It's not nearly so easy to save the gharials. Long-term solutions are required to help both. 1,000 kilometers away from the scene of disaster, a gharial rescue operation is in progress at the rehabilitation center at Gharial in the state of Uttar Pradesh. The gharial eggs, which were collected earlier from the Chambal River, have now successfully hatched here. The babies are released into concrete pens. More than 4,000 gharials have been hatched in captivity since 1975, when the project was launched. The results are encouraging. 45% have been successfully reared. But in this artificial environment, the gharials do have problems. For a start, the center finds it difficult to get enough fresh fish, and when it does, some little gharials get sick by stuffing themselves with too much, just like young children. Then veterinary help has to be given. This youngster is given medicine to help it digest its food. Others refuse to eat and have to be force-fed for a few days.
बंद करके सकला दो इसको।
Man is able to keep alive far more gharials than would survive in the natural state. These are 4 years old. They have reached an average length of 1.5 meters and are ready to take care of themselves. But first, they have to be captured for their journey to the release site. One of the crest scales on their tails is cut as a mark of identification. This does no harm and will help biologists to study the gharial's progress after release. Finally, they are packed away for the bumpy truck ride, which can last up to 8 hours. Their destination is the Chambal River.
चलो 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 जरा यहीं पकड़ खड़े हो जाओ चलो चलो धीरे धीरे चलो धीरे छोड़ दे दूसरी उठाओ
Altogether, more than 1,000 juvenile gharials have been returned to the rivers of India. The young gharials will soon be free to swim in the blue waters of the Chambal. It was close to this spot that they were taken as eggs 4 years ago. In India as a whole, the gharials still have to face the pressures of disturbance, pollution, and the demands of the ever-increasing population on the rivers. Some conservationists maintain that the gharial has been saved from extinction as a result of the restocking efforts, but no one will know the outcome of the restocking for at least 10 years. The gharial will only be safe when it starts breeding again in all the rivers that were once its home, including the mighty Ganges, from which this unique fish-eating crocodilian takes its name. The Ganges Gharial needs all the help it can get.